Okay. Hi, you guys. So I'm going to do a little bit of a different video today. This is for those of you who are maybe new to Christianity. Maybe you're just interested in learning more about it, or maybe you've been a Christian for a while, but you've just now started to dig into your Bible and you have no idea where to start. So this is for you, whether you're a beginner on any level. This is just going to be kind of some of the basics that I think these basic, facts kind of get overlooked because for us Christians, people who grew up with faith, going to church and stuff, this is just stuff that you kind of pick up on naturally or you learn over time. But when you become a Christian later in life, sometimes no one actually sits down and says these things to you and explains it to you, and it can be confusing. So we're going to go through some of these really quick, and I'm just kind of going off. I didn't take any notes or anything. What am I trying to say? I didn't write down any ideas, so I'm sorry if this is a little, rambly. I'll try to make it quick for you guys, though. Okay, so the first thing is when you start to read the Bible, one thing that you're kind of taught early on are, verses and how to read through the Bible. So first thing first, the first part of the Bible is the books. So the book of Genesis, the book of John. Each little, header or whatever you see in here, that is called a book. So you have the book of Matthew. Those are all books, and they are broken up throughout the Bible into the Old Testament and the New Testament. And the word testament actually means covenant in Hebrew. And so basically the term the Old Testament means the Old Covenant. Now there's two parts to the Bible because there are two covenants. The Old Testament talks about the covenant with Abraham and with the people of Israel. And I'll dig more into that in just a minute. And then the New Testament has the covenant that God enters through Jesus. So it's a covenant with the entire world through his son, Jesus Christ. So that is how it is broken up. You have the Old Testament, the New Testament, and then books in each of them. And then in each book, you have chapters. So you'll see these nice big numbers on here. Those are the chapters of the book. And then within each chapter, there are verses. And I don't know if you're going to be able to see it on video because of how I'm holding this, but you have little tiny numbers at the beginning of sentences usually, and those are verses. So if you ever see, something on the internet or, on Pinterest or something where there is a little, notation of where they got that verse from or that quote from, it usually has the book first. So we'll say Proverbs 31:10, for example. So Proverbs is the book, 31 is the chapter, and 10 is the verse. And that way, it's very easy to find exactly what you need. If you're looking up a certain verse, it's really easy to find it in your Bible because it is pretty much the same across all Bibles. Now, there are a ton of different versions of Bibles. The version that I'm using is the English Standard Version, which is very, very popular. The New International Version is very popular. NIV, ESV, the New King James Version, the King James Version. There are a ton of different versions of Bible. And whichever one you pick, I would say that if you're a new Christian, start with the New International Version or the English Standard Version. And the reason I say that is because it is very easy to understand and read. Certain Bibles, like for me, I use the New King James Version when I'm studying the Bible because it's a study Bible and it uses a little more, it's a different kind of language. Overall, the same ideas are all the same regardless of what version you choose. It's just that certain versions are a little easier to, just sit back and read a couple chapters, and other versions are meant more for studying. So, whatever version you choose is up to you. If someone gave you a Bible, just start there. If you're having a hard time reading through it, go to the library and check out a couple different versions, or you can go to Bible.com and you can choose through hundreds of versions of the Bible and decide which one you really can read the easiest. Because when you're first starting out, the important thing is just to read the Bible. You don't have to fully understand it yet. You don't have to become a theologian to understand it. You don't have to dig into crazy detailed Bible studies. All you need to do is just read the Bible and start to get an idea of the story. So that leads me to the second thing, which is the story of the Bible. I don't think that I ever had someone sit down and explain this to me until I was well into my teen years, and then all of a sudden I was like, oh, duh, that makes sense. But sometimes when you're raised as a Christian, you don't even think of it. So the Bible all tells one long story over many, many years through, I think it's 44 different authors. Hold on, I pulled it up. No, I'm sorry. Okay, so the Bible has 66 books in it, written by 40 authors. And those are the ones that we know of. There are some that, little verses that were written by someone else. But basically, this is a long story, and it is not something that you are meant to sit down and read like a novel. You're not meant to just, take a long weekend to finish this whole thing. You could read through the whole Bible, but it won't make a lot of sense, and if you do it for the first time, it's going to be confusing. So what you mostly need to understand about the whole story of the Bible is that it starts in Genesis with the creation of the universe, with the creation of the world, and the creation of humankind. And it takes us through basically how humankind went from living in ultimate peace with God to a sinful and unjust world that we live in today. And throughout the entire Old Testament, we follow one family line, Abram's family. And God makes a covenant with Abram, and that covenant goes down the line. And the covenant is that he will restore humanity to be with him again, to be able to lose that separation that they have because of sin. So another important little detail here is that a lot of the times, especially in the Old Testament, people's names change. So Abram is also known as Abraham. That's the same person. That happens a lot. Jacob, his name is also Israel. A lot of times in this time era, people would change their name after a huge event happened in their life, because a lot of times people's names reflected something about them. So their names had specific meaning. And if their name meant one thing that was no longer true for them, a lot of times their name would change. So keep that in mind as you're reading this, that sometimes the names change and it can be a little confusing, but most of the time it's the same person, and a quick Google search can help you out with that too. So basically, God makes a covenant with Abram to restore humanity through his family line. And so the Old Testament follows that family line down through many, many generations and tells the story of their family and how God is present through that family. So all of the stories that you read are one family line or one branch of a family in one family tree that starts with Abraham. So from there, we reach the New Testament. And Abram's family line eventually leads to Jesus. And when Jesus is born, he grows up to be a man who says that he is the Son of God, born in human flesh. So God is this abstract idea, but God put himself into human form through Jesus Christ. And that is who went and died on a cross for our sins to become the ultimate sacrifice for us, and then came back to life after 3 days, spent 40 days after his death here on earth, and then ascended to heaven. And so the New Testament is all about Jesus, his story, his time on earth, and then what happens immediately after he ascends into heaven, and how the new church starts to form, and how Christianity then forms from that. So I know that's a lot, but just keep in mind that the essential idea of the whole Bible is that God is restoring humanity through this family line, through Abram, and then restores humanity through Jesus Christ. And at the end of the Bible, we end in Revelations, where we get a promise that Jesus will come back someday, and he will completely finish this restoration, and we will be able to live in ultimate peace again with God, as we did in the beginning of Genesis. So this story, it eventually will come in full circle, And that is kind of how the story of the Bible works. So, if you are totally new, if you've never even cracked open a Bible before and you just don't know where to start reading, the first place I would suggest is in the Gospels. The Gospels are the first 4 books in the New Testament: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And those 4 books all tell the same story of Jesus and his time as he starts to, find people and restore them. So they're all the same time period and all the same stories, but told from 4 different perspectives of 4 different authors. So you don't have to read all 4 if you don't want to, or if you're not sure about that yet. But I would recommend starting in one of them. Personally, I love the Gospel of John. I just really like how it is written, and I like kind of the angle that he tells it from. But you can start in any of the 4. If you want to just start with Matthew, that's the first book in the New Testament, that is a great place to start. From there, I would read through some of the New Testament, because the whole idea of Christianity is that Jesus is the Son of God, and he was the ultimate sacrifice for us, and then he raised from the dead. So as you read through the New Testament, you really get an idea of what Christianity is kind of about. You start to learn who Jesus is and why Christians try, although we fail, to model ourselves after Jesus Christ. From there, even if you just read one gospel, the next place I would jump to is Genesis. And the reason for that is because most of the arguments or conversations or, theological ideas that you hear in the world about Christianity comes from Genesis, from the creation of the world, the creation of humankind, and how humankind spiraled into sin. Genesis is also a really long book. There's a lot of chapters in it, and it follows a lot of different stories all through this family line of Abram. So you will learn about Abram and his family, which eventually goes down and ends with the story of Jacob and his son Joseph in Egypt. And then from there, you can jump around where you want to. I would recommend checking out Bible.com and maybe choosing a study plan on there to read through the Bible over the next year. The Bible's a long book. You're not meant to just sit down and read it in one day, like I said. So a lot of times there's really good Bible studies that will take you through 1 year of reading the Bible. And in 1 year, you'll have read the entire Bible. Now, if you are one of those people where you just want to, read it, keep in mind that the Bible is not in chronological order. It's kind of strange, but there are certain books, like the book of Job, for example, actually takes place in the time of Genesis, in the book of Genesis, but it's much later in the Old Testament. So keep in mind that not all of this stuff is in chronological order, and there are certain books in the Bible that won't make as much sense to just read right out as other books. For example, Proverbs and Psalms. Psalms is a list of songs. They are praises to God, and they are songs and poems written all in one book. And it is a long book. You probably do not want to read through the entire book of Psalms in order, because it will get very bland and repetitive. So a lot of the 1-year Bible study plans that you'll see will have you reading, a book or a chapter in Genesis, and then 1 psalm for the day, and then a chapter in Exodus and a psalm for the day. And it takes you through a little more of a chronological order. So if you are interested in trying to read, the whole Bible a little faster, I would recommend looking for a Bible study that takes you through the chronological order of things. It'll make a little more sense as you read it, and it'll be a little easier to follow the story for the first time that you read it. Now, the last thing I'll say is that the Bible is not just a book. The Bible is something that it's almost like a guidebook for life. It's meant to be read and studied and reread over and over and prayed over, and used constantly throughout your life. So the best thing that you can do to start to grow your faith, or even just to start understanding Christianity more, is to not only read books in the Bible, but to reread them after reading different books. So, read the Gospel of John, and then read Genesis, and come back to the Gospel of John after that, and read it with a new, fresh pair of eyes. because once you understand certain stories in the Bible, when you come back to other stories, you start to see the huge overarching theme throughout the entire Bible, and you start to see the connections between different characters and families and different stories that all connect to this great ultimate plan that God has for restoring humanity. So, that was a little rambly. I apologize. It was also a lot of information, so please let me know if you have questions down below. Again, I didn't really plan this video very much, so if I said a fact wrong or something, please correct me, but do so politely. I didn't research most of this. It was going off memory, so I do apologize if I said something that didn't make a lot of sense. But I'm going to be doing more videos kind of digging into understanding the Bible more geared towards beginners. So let me know what you have questions about. Let me know what kind of videos you want to see. Or if there's certain, Bible studies that I can take you through that would really be helpful. I'm just not really sure where to begin. I feel like I'm being called to make these videos, but I have no idea where they're taking me. So I would love some advice or thoughts from you guys. And yeah, that's everything. So I will see you guys in the next video. Have a great day, and I'll talk to you later.